Alright fellas, Ainz vs Gojo is finally here. If you want a more in-depth explanation of Ainz's power, I highly recommend my How Strong is Ainz video, as I go much more in-depth on the hacks that he has. Now, Ainz is pretty simple to scale in speed. I won't be using the infinite speed argument going off of the World Eater, this meta also giving Ainz universal to universal plus AP, so I will not be using that high-end scale. I'm mostly going to stick to Ainz's other speed scaling. One speed scale comes from the novels in which Schaltir fights Brain Unglaus. Brain uses a technique which is stated to be as fast as a bolt of lightning. Schaltir is shown and stated directly to catch this attack between two fingers as if it were a joke. This scales back to Ainz as he's able to battle and defeat Schaltir in one-on-one combat. This is Schaltir ultra casually, so it is a low-end feat for her. It is also stated she can move/run at lightning speeds as well. The next avenue of scaling for Ainz's speed is light speed, which comes from Gazef having a light speed attack, which Ainz would scale above. As Gazef is more or less theorized to be around level 30 normally, the author of the series also stating through a blog chat that Gazef would scale above Zaryusu, for example, who is stated in a character sheet to be about level 20. In the web novel of Overlord, Brain is said to attack at light speed. In the light novel, he states before they register the flash, their heads are rolling, giving credence that this could be light speed. Brain thinks he can beat Gazef with his technique, Gazef having the slashes of light attack. He has even used the attack with only 4 light slashes in the past against Brain even dodging one of them, this giving even further credence to someone like Gazef or Brain being light speed or having light speed attacks which can be reacted to. Brain himself physically moving his body/arm at possible light speed. In short, this gives Ainz massively hypersonic to faster than light speeds, as Ainz is massively above these lower tier characters who can attack at light speed. And just a 5-level difference between characters is enough to practically guarantee a victory unless certain skills or traits are involved, which Gazef and such would not have, possibly giving Ainz more than just base FTL speeds. And now we'll move on to Gojo. Gojo is outright stated to be pretty much the strongest in the series, and would be above the likes of Maki, who has a calculable hypersonic feat, as well as being shown to dodge things moving at Mach speeds. Gojo would also be superior to Hikari, who has a massively hypersonic feat of dodging lightning, a high end putting this around Mach 950. Gojo also being able to manipulate tachyons to a degree, which are light speed bare minimum. Although manipulating said particles may not grant Gojo light speed based off of that alone, any light speed scaling in Jujutsu Kaisen is usually pretty contentious, so I'll leave it up to you all to decide. Gojo has also been argued to have inaccessible speed based off a few things. This can be debunked a multitude of different ways. One of them being that Gojo just didn't really understand what was happening to a degree, as he said it looks like time doesn't flow. As later it's shown that it is impossible to know how Gojo actually perceived time within said space, implying that time does exist there to some extent. It's also said that there's no way to measure the physical aspect of time, which wouldn't really mean that there is no time at all, just that it doesn't pass physically normally, as it can't really be measured. So it'd be hard to say this actually grants Gojo a higher form of speed. Now that speed is out of the way, let's move over towards attack potency. Ainz's attack potency is a little more tricky than his speed, as it has a lot of contentions for some people. And once again, I will not be using the universal meta. Schaltir is compared to a country-destroying monster in the web novel. Schaltir would scale above this country-destroying vampire, as the 13 heroes are not considered level 100, the 13 heroes being the one who killed this country-destroying vampire. The official Yen Press novel saying the same in that this vampire destroyed a country, which gives even further credence to Ainz being country level at the bare minimum. Another form of country scaling comes from Ainz hypothesizing that this one item which he considers to be of a lower tier to have power which comes close enough to destroying a country, and he more or less shrugs it off as it not really being special. There is also the fact that Ainz can create black holes, most scientific studies agreeing that a black hole only needs to be the size of a marble or a penny to destroy planet Earth. This can grant Ainz planetary scaling. I did, however, find a calc which puts it at star level, and I'll put a multitude of calcs on the screen, one with a guesstimate on the black hole's size and one with pixel scaling. In the CD drama, Ainz and the Guardians defeat a tree which is a threat to the world and can destroy it, possibly giving planetary scaling through that. Another avenue of planetary scaling is through the World Eater, which can devour the leaves of the Yggdrasil, which are stated to be worlds. People try to downplay this by saying that the worlds are only 3 times the size of Tokyo. This is only set in the web novel to my knowledge. And even then, it would likely just be a limitation of the game, while in the lore and even the anime, we see stars and such in the background. So at best, the scaling is more unquantifiable than anything, but more than likely planetary. This being the way to get Ainz to universal with different interpretations and arguments. So, on a lower-esque end, Ainz would have country scaling at the bare minimum, with more mid-ends being planetary and high-ends being star level. This being an attack potency, not necessarily destructive capacity. And just to throw out there, I highly recommend watching Toaster XD, as he has practically all the scaling that I use for Gojo in this video. The first thing that people bring up for Gojo's attack potency is a character in the series named Daigon being able to use his domain expansion to create an island with an unknown amount of water, which can be scaled to island level via creation. There are arguments that a star was created, but it's not really concrete as to whether this little spot on the panel is a star or just sort of an action bubble, so to speak. The next would be to use his hollow purple, which has calcs that put it on the country levels of energy, which will be posted on screen, and this ability being stated to work on an atomic level. You can also scale him above a character which utilizes a black hole, which is debatable as even the character who created it had difficulty in actually manipulating and couldn't really control it. There also being more context towards this fight. Although if you want to use it regardless, you could argue planetary as the whole world could have been at stake from said black hole, but it is very contentious. It's not like no one's heard of Gojo scaling before, and I only added a few new scaling methods for Ainz that weren't in my previous video. These two characters can be argued to have similar physical stats, although Ainz's low-end scaling is above Gojo's mid to high-end scaling, Gojo needing a lot of benefits to be on Ainz's level physically. But could Ainz bypass the infinity? This is partially a deciding factor in this debate. To explain this in the shortest way possible, the infinity is stated to be a rate of convergence, which follows the premise of Achilles and the tortoise to a degree. Basically, what Gojo is doing is bringing the concept of infinity into the real world and dividing the distance between him and whatever is coming at him an infinite amount of times. Whether you think that somebody needs infinite speed to bypass this ability is up to you. But the debunk needing infinite speed to bypass would just be the fact that it is stated to be a convergence. That would make him asymptotic, meaning that the object or person will never reach him. As noted in the fight against Jogo, he started slowing down as he reached Gojo. So it can be argued that it's not creating an infinite distance inherently, but making it require an infinite amount of time, creating the effect of infinite distance. If you assign space and time to different axes, the time it takes to travel even the most finite distance, the closer you get to him increases out to infinity. So which abilities can Ainz use to bypass this? The first ability that comes to mind would be the Reality Slash. It is stated multiple times that it cleaves through the very fabric of space and is compared to World Break, which is stated to cut through space-time. It is only inferior in the sense of damage, as World Break is just a more stronger damaging version. So even if Gojo is creating an infinite distance between himself and Ainz, he could literally just cut through the fabric of space-time for it to bypass the ability. It is also possible that Ainz could just crush Gojo's heart with Grasp Heart, as it is one of his favorite moves. considering when he first meets an enemy of the New World, he immediately crushes their heart. Even if the spell is somehow resisted, it does stun the target. It's hard to say whether Gojo could actually defend against this ability, as it's just literally crushing his heart. The next possible way to combat this would be for Ainz to stop time. He's done this many times throughout the series, and is even shown to do it instantly with no incantation at the start of a battle. As I mentioned briefly when I was explaining the Infinity, you could argue that time stop is able to negate it. If you assign space and time to different axes, and what I said in regards to it possibly not being an infinite distance inherently, but require an infinite amount of time to do so, then time stop could negate it, since the distance after would still be finite. Or you can say that the time stop shuts off his brain, and that shuts off the Infinity in turn. You could counter this with Gojo being able to move into place with the wacky time, but as I went over before, that can be debunked. That's just a few possible ways in which Ainz could bypass this ability. There is definitely much more though. You could make the argument that with the Wish Upon a Star Ring, he could quite literally steal the Infinity. This would be very heavily out of character, but it is something that Ainz could potentially do if he really wanted to. Or that he possesses an item which stops his movements from being hindered by outside forces and so on. And since Ainz can potentially bypass the Infinity, he could just cleave him in half, crush his heart, or use one of the many hacks outlined in my Ainz video, like True Death. And if he is able to bypass the Infinity, then there's not much Gojo could do in return to kill him. And since Ainz is likely going to be faster than Gojo, along with being able to teleport rapidly, Gojo's other abilities may not even be able to touch him in that regard. And Ainz can tank attacks compared to Existence Erasure, with the fact that world items counter the effect of other world items, this being in regards to Gojo being able to attack on an atomic level. Which some of the world items being Absolute Mind Control, Existence Erasure, being sealed in another dimension, and many more. So it is possible that Ainz could resist the ability which floods infinite information into his head. For one, it is stated that he is immune to mental effects, whether they be positive or negative. And while that is a no limits fallacy on my part, there is lots of evidence about Ainz being able to resist mental attacks. And if Gojo does have to touch him, as soon as he gets close, Ainz can use negative touch or negative burst, which would inflict him with a sort of poison that he cannot heal from, and sap away all of his strength. This is not even going over the goal of All Life is Death, which bypasses all immunity to instant death and can even kill constructs which are stated to have no life, as well as killing the oxygen in the air. So if Ainz does manage to get this off, he could quite literally kill all the oxygen in a beyond 100-meter radius and just poison Gojo and kill him. There are definitely more win cons for Ainz, but I think you all get the idea. To put it brief, Ainz is faster, stronger, and has more hacks than Gojo, with multiple ways to bypass the Infinity. Who do you all think wins? I did a poll a while back which the majority voted for Ainz, but let me know what you all think, and I'll see you in the next video.